What's up, snappers? Welcome back to the channel. DDDREWSKY here. Today we're gonna be looking at the brand new card, Raccoon and Groot, to see if they're worth your precious resources. We're gonna be looking at the key synergies, counters, and some decks that I brewed for them. But wait, before we do that, please like the video, please subscribe to the channel. I do weekly reviews of the brand new card in Marvel Snap, so you don't want to miss out. Hit that notification bell right now. Hi everyone, editor DDDREWSKY here. I totally forgot to mention that I am running a giveaway for a green cosmic border, 1 premium mystery variant, and 2 mystery variants. So if you want to enter in, make sure you enter in with the link in the description below. So I want to say a big thank you to you guys and good luck to everyone that's entering in. Now let's get back into it. So now the question is, who is Rocket and Groot? Let's take a look. So Rocket and Groot are a 3-cost, 3-powered card with the ability of you can move this once after your opponent plays a card here, steal 1 power from it. So this is the first ever card that is combining 2 characters from Marvel Snap. I think this card has very cool and a unique ability, especially being able to move the card once, being able to steal the power multiple times from the opponent. I think it's very, very good, right? So now let's take a look at some of the pros and cons about Rocket and Groot. Let's take a look. So the first pro I want to talk about is potential 5-powered card, right? If you can predict where the opponent is playing, I think stealing the power from the opponent is very strong in Marvel Snap. So you can still power multiple times, which I think is very, very strong in Marvel Snap, especially if you can predict where the opponent is playing. Being able to do it multiple times is very, very good, right? Steal is great. So another pro about the card is that you can move the card whenever you want, right? You can move the card the next turn, or you can save it for like the end of the game. I think it's very, very strong in Marvel Snap. Another pro about the card is that it could be potentially testing from second dinner, right? We already know Rocket, Raccoon, and Groot are not great cards individually, but with this card, especially stealing power, this could be like the new thing, right? Maybe they will eventually rework the cards, like the Guardians cards, for example, like Star-Lord, maybe even Gamora, to be stealing power instead of predicting power, right? So a big con is that you have to predict where the opponent plays, right? Obviously that's not easy, but if you surround the card with, you know, things that I might mention in the future, then you might have a better chance of knowing where the opponent is going to be playing their cards. So another con about the card is that you can only move once, right? It doesn't really give you that flexibility of being able to move it multiple times, but I think it's fair for balance sake, right? So another con about the card is that it can be countered easily, right? You're going to be seeing that Rocket and Groot on the board, and then you will know where they're potentially going to be moving the card, and they're stationary, right? So if there's a red Guardian, for example, it could hit this card and then the card won't be able to do anything, right? Another con about this card is that it's a minor power gain, right? So stealing 1 power is definitely very small compared to other cards like Silver Sable, for example, or even Cassandra Nova. Overall, like the power gain from, you know, predicting where the opponent is playing their card, it's pretty small, right? All right, now let's look at some of the synergies and counters for this card. Let's take a look. So the first synergy that I want to talk about is Agony. Agony is an example of a card that can boost power for this card, especially when you're able to move it after. So I think Agony is a great pick if you want to juice up the power in this card and then move it to another location later. Jean Grey is a great synergy for this card because you want to be able to predict where the opponent is playing, right? So Jean Grey kind of like mitigates that type of like guessing game. So if you run Jean Grey and then you know where they're going to be playing their first card, right? And then you can just run Rocket, Raccoon, and Groot on that lane, and then you should be able to steal power from them, right? Professor X is another great synergistic piece because you'll be able to move Rocket, Raccoon, and Groot to his lane, or, you know, depending on what deck that you make, you can move your cards into his lane, right? So there's synergy right there. So Red Guardian is a great counter pick for this card because you're going to be disabling the movement of this card. And another counter is Shadow King. Of course, with stealing the power, you can revert that power back. So Luke Cage is another great counter for this card, especially stopping the power that's been stolen from Rocket, Raccoon, and Groot. So it's definitely a great counter right there. All right, now let's take a look at some of the decks that I brewed. I think they're pretty fun and competitive. Let's take a look. So the first deck that we have is called Bad Rocket and Groot. So the ideal goal of this deck is to negatively afflict damage to your opponent and then reap all the benefits of Luke Cage, cheating out cards, and getting a lot of power. So for turn 1, Silver Sable is great on curve. Turn 2, Hazmat is probably best to be saved near the end of the game, but on curve you could do Scorpion, even US Agent. US Agent you probably want to save for the end turns. Cassandra Nova is great on curve here as well on turn 3. She's great against, you know, all the big decks like Arishem and Thanos. Luke Cage is very situational depending on what you want to do with your board state. You could either protect your cards or, you know, depending on the really bad locations, Luke Cage is great. Red Guardian is another great pick here, especially countering a lot of the cards in this meta, especially a mirror matchup. Rocket, Raccoon, and Groot again on turn 3 is a great on curve play, especially stealing power and then moving that power to another lane. So it synergizes very well with this deck with the negative affliction. So Frigga is good to copy any of the low cost cards here in this deck. You probably don't want to aim for anything higher than 4 cost, but if you run Anti-Venom on turn 4, you can copy the 0 cost card with Frigga, which is crazy. For turn 4, Malekith is great on curve here, especially cheating out one of the, you know, lower cost cards here in this deck. Anti-Venom is great on curve on turn 4 too as well. Obviously, just like I mentioned before, you get a very cheap cost card and then, you know, revert that power back with Luke Cage. Ajax is a great finisher on turn 5 or 6. You definitely want to pair up Ajax with Hazmat. Hazmat definitely should be done after Ajax, but that combo is insane. All right, so now let's look at my second list. So this list is called Ongoing Rocket and Groot. So the ideal goal of this deck is to have a lot of ongoing cards on the board and then power them up, or run Doom 2099 and just flood the board with a lot of ongoing power. So for turn 1, Ant-Man is great on curve. So for turn 2, you do Madam Web or Dazzler. Both of them are great on curve. Cosmo, you definitely is situational. You definitely should run this maybe in the later turns, or on curve is okay as well. Rocket, Raccoon, and Groot is great in this list, especially being paired up with the card like I mentioned, Jean Grey. You definitely predict a little bit better with Jean Grey and Rocket Raccoon. Ideally, you probably want to do Jean Grey first and then Rocket Raccoon and Groot to follow up with Jean Grey. Hope Summers is great, especially if you're going to be stacking 2 lanes with this list. Definitely use Hope Summers on the Jean Grey lane, or you can even do Hope Summers, Rocket Raccoon on the same lane. Definitely a great combination right there. So for turn 4, Dr. Doom 2099 is great on curve play, especially setting up those Doom bots. Those Doom bots are also ongoing, so Spectrum loves ongoing cards, so definitely has some synergy right there. Super Scroll is great on curve or saved for the later turns, especially as a surprise tech card. Claw is great in this list, especially on curve to juice up power in a different lane that you can't reach. Claw is definitely a cube sealer. Dr. Doom is another great finisher with this list to pair up with Doom 2099. We already saw how devastating that combo is, so definitely utilize that. And then Spectrum is a great alternative play on turn 6 to juice up every ongoing card here. So now let's look at my third and final list. So this list is called Angry Rocket and Groot. So this is my take on the toxic move style lists. You definitely want to move your opponent's cards, move your own cards, and then reap all the benefits of the movement. So for turn 1, Kingpin and Nico Minaru are great on curve plays, especially setting up the Kingpin lane for the later turns. Turn 2, Kraven is great on curve or Scream, especially setting up a lane to just start generating power or to stealing power on the opponent's lanes. So for turn 3, Rocket, Raccoon, and Groot are great on curve, especially they synergize well with Kraven and Kingpin. Stealing power is great with Kingpin, and then of course moving the Rocket, Raccoon, and Groot to the Kraven lane, they get more benefit from the movement, right? Polaris is great to move your enemy's cards to either the Kraven lane or Kingpin lane, or just to start generating power for Scream. Spider-Man is great, again, just to disrupt your opponent, moving their card to either the Kraven lane or Kingpin lane. Shang-Chi is a great counter just overall. If the opponent is playing really big cards, you definitely want to save the Shang-Chi for the later turns. Galacta is a great turn 4 play as well, especially juicing up a lot of power in this deck that's very lacking. The +3 is insane. Miles Morales gets huge benefit from this deck. It's usually a 1 cost because of all the movement that's happening to your opponent's card and your cards. Arrow is a great turn 5 play, especially disrupting your opponent, maybe moving your opponent's card to a certain lane that they don't really want to win that lane. She's a great disruptor card. And then Magneto is a great turn 6 play, especially with a lot of 3 and 4 cost cards in the meta. Magneto's great as a disrupting card. All right, now let's take a look at the spotlights that are featured with Rocket, Raccoon, and Groot. Let's take a look. So Rocket Raccoon and Groot are paired up with Blob and Selene. So Rocket Raccoon and Groot are Series 5, Blob is Series 5, and Selene is Series 4. So I would say Blob is pretty good, especially being in a lot of decks that require a lot of power, especially like Thanos, for example, or even Airshim. Blob is a must-have. Selene, I would say, is definitely a skippable card. Unfortunately, after her, change from -1 power to 2, kind of killed the card, unfortunately. So I would say Selene is definitely a passable card. For the Spotlight variants, I really don't like the Rocket Raccoon and Groot or the Blob. I think they're definitely passable in my opinion. And the Selene, I think she actually looks really, really great with her cape. But again, art is subjective. It really depends on what you value in art. But those are my picks. So remember to have 4 keys when you're opening in a week. You definitely don't want to miss out on a card that you're really aiming for. So definitely have 4 keys before opening. All right, now let's take a look at my star ratings for Rocket Raccoon and Groot. Let's take a look. So for competitive, I gave him a 3 stars out of 5. I think the card would be pretty good, but there could be situations where it can be countered, right? So I gave it a fair 3 stars. For fun, I would say 4 stars. People love moving cards, or people love stealing power. So I would say for fun factor, being able to do those 2 things, I think it'd be pretty up there, right? For flexibility, 3 stars. I think it can be in a lot of decks, really, right? It's very flexible in that manner, but I would say eventually utilizing this type of utility will be very niche in a way. So I would say 3 stars is fair for that. For future changes, I would say 2 stars. I think the card is fairly balanced. I don't really see a lot of things that they could potentially do. Maybe they can even buff the card, maybe stealing 2 instead of 1 power. I think that could be a thing. All right, so now let's look at my final review of Rocket Raccoon and Groot. Are they worth a snap or skip? Let's take a look. So I say snap on Rocket Raccoon and Groot. I love the unique ability of being able to move the card once and then stealing power from the card. I feel like there's a lot of potential with this card, especially if it does well, that they hopefully will rework the other Guardians of the Galaxy cards. So let's see, right? Let's hope that this card does well. So let me know your thoughts on this card. What are some synergies, maybe some decks that I missed out on, or am I completely wrong? Let me know in the comments below. So if you haven't yet, please like the video, please subscribe to the channel. I would love for you to be a part of this amazing community here on YouTube, and I'll see you guys on the next Snap or Skip. Happy snapping.